We usually think about history in these big, sweeping eras, right? Decades, centuries. But what if our world, everyone we know, the good and the bad, was actually kickstarted in one single explosive year? Well, that year was 1909.
And this is what 1909 is all about, this incredible contradiction. I mean, on one hand, you could finally buy an electric toaster, a little piece of the future right in your kitchen. But on the other hand, the women making the most fashionable clothes of the day were literally locked inside deadly sweatshops. So you have convenience and you have risk side by side. And that tension, well, that's the story we're diving into.
So yeah, 1909, a year of contradictions. We're going to see how this one pivotal year really did set the stage for the entire 20th century, and maybe even for the world we're living in right now.
Okay, so let's start with the good stuff, the promise of progress. Because back in 1909, the optimism was just off the charts. It really felt like we were cracking the code to, well, everything. Like science and technology were about to solve all of humanity's problems.
And we're not talking about some abstract stuff in a lab. Think about it. Bakelite. This was the first fully synthetic plastic. Suddenly, you have the material for radios, phones, jewelry, you name it. Then there's the Haber process. This sounds technical, but it meant we could mass produce fertilizer. It completely changed how we grow food. And the pH scale. It gave us a standard way to measure acidity. These weren't just inventions. They were the building blocks of our modern world. And that same energy was taken to the skies. On July 25th, a guy named Louis Blériot flies a plane across the English Channel. For centuries, that was a major barrier. And now, it's just a quick flight. But get this, 9 days later, 9 days, the US military buys its first airplane. In just over a week, flying went from being a crazy daredevil stunt to a serious tool of military power. The pace of change was just breathtaking. This scope of what we were figuring out was wow. I mean, in this 1 year, we figured out the atom has a tiny, dense nucleus. The word gene was created. We even figured out the boundary between the Earth's crust and its mantle. And then way out in space, we took the first ever picture of Pluto. We didn't even realize what it was for another 2 decades, but we saw it. From the tiniest atom to the farthest reaches of the solar system, it really felt like humanity could do anything. Okay, but all that optimism, all that progress, it came at a price. There was a dark side to this new modern age, a really brutal one. And for millions of people, progress didn't feel like a promise at all. It felt like a trap. Which brings us to the big question, right? Who was actually building this modern world? Who paid the price for all these incredible breakthroughs? Believe it or not, you can see this whole story just by looking at fashion. You had the old Victorian style, super restrictive, corsets, the whole deal. That gave way to this much more practical, straighter look for the so-called new woman who is now working in offices and cities. And the key piece of clothing was the shirtwaist blouse. Think of it like the jeans and t-shirt of its day. It was a symbol that said, I'm modern, I'm mobile, I'm free. But here's the heartbreaking irony. The women making these symbols of freedom, they were living in conditions that were the exact opposite of free. We're talking mostly young immigrant women, many of them Jewish and Italian, working insane hours, like 65 to 75 hours a week, for pennies. The sweatshops were disgusting, crowded, and deadly. And to stop them from taking breaks, the owners would lock the doors from the outside, trapping them in. And then, one moment changes everything. There's this big union meeting. All these men are up on stage giving these long, cautious speeches. And a 23-year-old Ukrainian immigrant named Klara Lemlek, who's already been beaten up for protesting, gets completely fed up. She gets up on the stage, brushes past the men, and says, I have no further patience for talk. I move, we go on a general strike. Just like that. And the whole room just erupted. Her words were like a match on gasoline. The very next day, 20,000 workers, almost all of them young women, walked off the job. 20,000. That was the biggest strike by women in American history at that time. The very people making the uniform of the new woman were now leading their own rebellion. So now we're in a real fight for the future. And this struggle for basic dignity, it wasn't just in the factories. No. All across America, people were fighting for their fundamental rights, pushing back against the entire power structure. You have to remember, this is a moment when America is really starting to project its power outward. It's becoming a global player. For example, in 1909, the U.S. Navy starts building its huge new naval base at Pearl Harbor.
But while America was flexing its muscles abroad, its own citizens were fighting for power right here at home. A huge part of the population was still fighting just to be seen as a full citizen. And this fight took a major step forward on February 12, 1909. That's when the NAACP was founded. And it wasn't founded in a vacuum. It was a direct response to absolutely horrific racial violence. A group of black and white activists, including legends like W.E.B. Du Bois and I.W. Wells Barnett, basically said enough is enough. The country had to finally live up to the promises it made in the Constitution. For them, this wasn't some intellectual exercise. It was literally a matter of life and death. And that's how this one year, 1909, ends up forging the 20th century. You've got these two massive forces, this incredible, mind-blowing progress, and this desperate, unrelenting struggle for basic rights, smashing into each other.
When you boil it down, the contrasts are just telling. Think about it. In the very same year that we're seeing Pluto for the first time, we're still fighting over the meaning of the 14th Amendment here on Earth. In the same year, we're building the incredible Manhattan Bridge, a masterpiece of engineering. We can't even guarantee a safe fire escape for the people working in our factories. The promise and the struggle. The entire 20th century was born right there, in that conflict.
So 1909's contradictions forged a new century. And that leaves us with one last thought. That tension, right, between amazing innovation and the fight for basic human dignity, that was the story of 1909. So now, over 100 years later, in our own time of incredible technological leaps and deep, deep social divides, you have to ask yourself, are we still living in its shadow?